Hello, everybody. My name is Ross, and welcome to TactiCon. This is Playing with Uncertainty, Embracing Randomness in Management and Strategy Games. So we're going to be talking about the impact of the RNG, a topic that is strong at heart to many of you out there, and we're so excited. So I'd just like to go around and introduce our panel. We're going to go ahead and start with Eliza, please.
Hi, I'm Eliza or Aliza Wenders from Hungary, from Agricet Studios. We are currently developing Ultimate Space Commando Counterforce, a sequel to our first game USC that came out almost 10 years ago. And it's an old school turn-based top-down view strategy and tactics game about Marines fighting aliens in a sci-fi environment. And me myself, I have been designing games for the past 20 years. Mm, and I'm a board game and a tabletop role-playing game fan and also creator. So I think I'm in a good place in this panel to share my opinions about the topic, and I'm very interested in yours too. So let's do this.
Excellent. Let's go to Francois, please.
Hey, hi, my name is François Ligier. I'm a French game designer for the past 6 years. Currently, I'm working on Sandwalkers in Goblin Studio. As a gamer and as a designer, I'm interested in a lot of different types of game. I'm far from a strategy expert, but I'm really interested in roguelikes lately. I find that they often bring interesting twists and interesting ways of having some layer of strategy in an environment that's just constantly changing. So I'm really interested in today's topic too, and thanks for the invite.
All right, and Leo.
Hi guys, I'm Leo from Little Leo Games. We are a studio from São Paulo, Brazil, and I'm actually a former civil engineer, and I changed to the industry, in the industry in 2018. Um, we are currently developing our studio. The Little Leo Games is currently developing Astrea, Six-Sided Oracles, a dice deck building roguelike. So I'm not the most experienced too, but I think our game is all about randomness because a strategy game with dice is already all about randomness. So I think I can make some cool inputs about what I learned from the development of Australia. And I started developing board games too. So I just try to bring that feeling of board games to video games, basically. So that's it.
Excellent, excellent. And my name is Ross. I'm the founder of D20 Studios. I've been developing games for the past 15 years in both the indie and AAA space. For the past 7 years, I've been working on a title called Abalon. It's a turn-based tactics slash deck builder roguelike. So a lot of combinations from the various games we've heard discussed already. And yeah, we're actually launching into our 1.0 on May 11th. So we're very excited about that. And in my spare time, I also like to, share and contribute knowledge. I'm a big proponent of helping get people pumped up about game development. So I do a lot of talks like this to get people excited. And, we also have a YouTube channel we help people out on. So yeah, very excited to be here on this panel. All right. Introductions out of the way. Let's move on to our next agenda item. We're going to start with a very simple icebreaker question. I'm going to outlay the rules here. The answer is going to be a for or against, just a one-word answer. We're going to just try and get your stance here on where you are with regards to randomness. So the question is, are you generally for or against randomness in strategy games? Remember, one-word answer, and we'll go ahead and do the same order we did before. Eliza, Francois, then Leo. All right, go.
4.
For
Four.
And I will also say force. I was kind of hoping we'd have somebody who's against.
Oh my
But
god.
we're not going to have too much debate. We're going to be nodding our heads. Yes, randomness is good. Okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'll try to play devil's advocate a little bit here on the opposite side. I know some of the key arguments that typically get presented in favor against randomness. So I will I will try to serve as devil's advocate and push you guys to answer those questions. Okay.
I can help you. I can help you as an advocate for the devil because I should say to an extent. So I very much like randomness, but I can also talk about the limits. I don't think a game should pass in terms of randomness. So maybe then we are the one side and
All right.
but
all right.
but I'm absolutely for randomness by the way.
We're all for it. It's okay. It's okay. Well, people are here to embrace it. Our panel is embracing randomness, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's I
Yeah,
think it's
true.
a fair group. Okay. All right, let's move on. All right, so the next question I have for you guys is to try and get a little bit into what it is that makes strategy games different, right? Because actually, I'm sorry, I'm gonna back that up. The first thing I wanted to do was make sure we define what randomness is. This is for the benefit of the audience because randomness in games can mean a lot of things. It could be the rolling of a dice. It could be the starting spawn positions. So I just want to kind of outlay just a basic definition of what we mean by randomness in games. And we're going to give it two flavors. So generally, in terms of design of games, we have something called input randomness and output randomness. All right. Input randomness is anything that comes in at the start of the game that's not influenced by further actions. This could be something like the map layout. So when you come into the game world and the map has delegated spawn areas for you, or it's delegated initial set of starting resources, for example. These are things that aren't that you begin with and then have to sort of adapt with, but that aren't affecting the outcomes later on. Output randomness, by contrast, would be something like I want to attack somebody, and in order to determine if I hit or not, I have to roll a dice. So my decision to attack is now influenced by a random outcome that is beyond my, I guess, strategic decision, you could say. And then just with regards to uncertainty. So uncertainty and randomness are often linked together. They're actually two very distinct things. Uncertainty means that you have something that is an unknown outcome. And the unknown outcome could be simply that you don't have the information, right? For example, like if you're playing, let's say, StarCraft, and you don't know where your opponent's base is, that's uncertainty, but it's not randomness. Whereas if you're going to play a card-based game, for example, and you're going to draw your next card, that is uncertain, but it's also random. So just want to put those definitions out there so we can all be on the same page with regards to these different things. So if you want to say things like, generally I'm in favor of input randomness, but output randomness bad, then we can all now understand what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah. So that's out of the way. All right. Now my next question, my first question for you guys, really, I guess the first big question. Okay. What is the essential value that you're striving to deliver in the design of a strategy game over other games? So, and what I mean by this is that different genres like a first-person shooter or platformer may also embrace randomness, but it's going to have a very different implication for strategy games because we have different goals in what we want to achieve with the design. So just kind of give us an overview of sort of when you design a strategy game, what are the goals? What is the philosophy? What is the idea? What is the essential like meat of the presentation you want to get across so that we can kind of use that as a way to assess how effectively randomness can either contribute or take away from that essential goal. And we'll start with Elijah to keep this simple. We'll just kind of do that same clockwise order.
Cool.
Okay, so to keep the things a bit simpler, I think I will focus on terms of tactics inside the strategy genre for now because it's easier to talk about. So the game I am making is a combat game in a board game like map that is divided into a grid with specific rules, and units, marines and aliens have this base set of attributes and skills, passive skills like in a board game or a role-playing game. Actually, the combat system is very much reminiscent of a complex core combat system for a role-playing game. And for me, combat in a tactical game must follow in some way reality. And if you think about the art of war, the history of warfare in with humanity through the millennia, when you engage an enemy, it's never certain what will happen. And even if you plan your actions very carefully, as a strategist, giving orders to your units, to your men on the field, uh, there are things that will happen or won't happen, and you have no control over it. And when those things happen, you have to reconsider your choices. You have to give new orders, and you have to adapt to that situation that has emerged. And it can be like giving a new order for a flanking movement, or it can be salvaging the results of an explosion nobody planned for, a devastating explosion that took all of your squad. And now you have to come up with another solution to solve the mission, to complete your objectives. And I think this is why I am very much for randomness, not just uncertainty, because it's one thing to make a decision about things you don't know, but when you are firing a rifle and it misfires and your marine dies instead of the enemy you were planning to shoot, then it's a new situation, and it's output randomness, as you said. And I think a true strategy or tactics game must take into account that in real life nothing happens as you planned it to happen. Of course, one can make an argument about nothing is random, everything may be deterministic, but quantum physics is a little bit on the other side of this argument. So I'm not here as a physicist or a philosopher. So
I really
I could
I want
be.
to hear from physicist Eliza. That's good. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well put.
So
Well put.
but I think that it's important in a strategy game or a tactics game to present random events, not just on the greater scale, but on the micro scale that the player has to adapt to. Because this is if you don't have these random events, then it's a puzzle game and not a tactics game. A
Yeah.
puzzle has a definite way to solve it, maybe more ways than one, but a definite way to solve it. And if you know that, you are clever enough to realize what is the solution, you can solve it. But in a tactics situation, sometimes you have to improvise to survive, to complete your objective. And that is why I am very much for in randomness in a game like we are developing right now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well put, Eliza. All right, Francois.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I'm really thinking about systems, and I find that pretty interesting what Eliza meant by saying that random can be used as a way to represent just scale of a unit, etc. But myself, when I design systems, I'm trying to focus on creating dilemmas for the player, because specifically for strategy game, it's not the game feel, it's not the realization, it's often not that much the narrative elements that's going to keep your players engaged with your game and having an interest in replaying another game, going further into your game. Most of the time, it's going to be about making meaningful decisions. And specifically for strategy game, it's really important that those decisions, they can't just be rushed. They have to be interesting for your players to consider several elements, different parameters, the cost, the benefits, the safety of this choice. Um, all of this is what's going to create interest for your player to well, keep playing and just like be rewarded for taking all of these parameters into account, finding the best way to the best move to progress toward victory. And in that sense, I think that input randomness is really interesting when it comes to just providing fresh sets of initial parameters. I like to compare roguelikes to Sudokus because they have you have the same structure over and over, but you have to think every time you want to solve one. And when it comes to output randomness, I think that assuming players have a way to simplify the output randomness into one certainty, like this chest is going to give me a magical item. It's not going to give me any possible item from the game, just a magical item. Then they have this certainty and they can play and plan around this certainty of I'm playing a mage, I'm interested in that chest. I'm playing a warrior, I'm probably not that interested in that chest. Can I allow myself to spend something just to see what's inside? This is the kind of question that begins to pop up in players' mind when they have this kind of system. So I think that randomness allows to, like Eliza said, transform games from puzzle games to making a set and a sequence of educated bets on your chances of winning, and that is in some way more interesting than having just a static decision that always leads to the thing.
Exactly, if I might say. And that's why, for example, in the game I'm making, USC Counterforce, weapons are not basically one weapon is better than the first one, and then the third one is better than the second one, but all have different properties, and you choose which you like to use because they have them tackle you different kinds of situations when they emerge randomly. And that's why it's important to build your squad well, because a good squad can adapt to various situations very well. A bad squad can't adapt
Yeah.
to nothing, and they will die when something bad happens.
Excellent. Thank you so
That's
much.
true.
All right, Leo.
Yeah. So I basically agree with all that you guys said. And I think in strategy games, input randomness is usually for me the safer route. It's like it's more safer to use it than when designing it than the output, because output randomness have the problem of sometimes causing frustration on players. So I would say that input randomness is like safe to use. Of course, you can't use a lot, or else everything falls and the player gets just too confused. Uh, but the output randomness need to be used with caution. Like, uh, but I feel that, like Eliza said, that it makes the game more tactical. So because you have to adapt, and in the end, I think it depends on the game that you are making. Because if you want a game where the player have to adapt, okay, you can use output randomness. But like, I think it wouldn't be a problem to have like a tactical game where there's no output randomness. I think
Here,
that
let's back up real quick.
would be
I want to get to that, but first I want to make sure we hear from you. The question was, what essential value are you striving to deliver in the design of a strategy game? And you can speak specifically to your own design games. So I want to get to the randomness debate, but first I want to just kind of hear what makes
okay. So
strategy
for
games
my
unique for
game,
you. Yes, yes. Tell me about why what makes it different than a first person shooter or a puzzler? Like, why strategy, and what's the essential value you're trying to convey to the player in that strategy game?
okay. Okay, I think the in one sentence I would say that would be make the player feel smart, basically.
Yeah.
I think
Yes.
that's for me like, okay, I know that puzzles do the same, but uh, it's like Eliza said, you can if you add those deeper decisions where you don't like the solution is not the same, where you have to adapt, it becomes a strategy game. And I feel that it makes the player feel really smart. So when I'm designing my games, that's what I'm aiming usually. Like even with output randomness or input randomness, in the end is like the player need to feel that he was smart, and even when he fails, he knows that it was his fault. Like,
Mm.
and if you have a lot of randomness, usually the player thinks the fault it's the game fault. So I think that's what I start designing basically with randomness. Being really
Excellent.
careful, basically, but
Yeah.
using not a lot, but being really careful at the same time.
All right, great. I'm gonna summarize that up. This was really good. I appreciate you guys, conveying that. So from Eliza, we heard, just as a bullet point summary, adaptability was a key value. The ability to adapt to uncertain situations is a fundamental part that makes strategy games different than other games. And then from Francois, we heard that the randomness, or uncertainty both can add to the value of the decisions and the engagement that the player is having with it. It creates interesting situations that has more diversity and, ability to it. And then from Leo, making the player feel smart. I thought that was very succinct and very clever way of defining what makes a strategy game distinctive. Great. I'll end on that too. So I've actually thought a lot about this and done some, debates and talks with this in the past, and trying to get to the meat of what makes a strategy game. If you're trying to define the essentialness, I would say a strategy game is a construct, of rules, and the principal value is create the active play that lets you creatively outwit your opponent. So I very much echoing, I think, what Leo said there, making the player feel smart. It's, leveraging creativity. It's putting together thought processes that lead to meaningful outcomes, and I also think that adaptability is a very essential part of that. So what I'm saying is I agree with all of you, and I think that, yeah,
If we mix together all the
Yeah.
opinions, we have the perfect strategy game.
Yeah, exactly. So
I
yeah.
realized we are nodding to each other when anyone is
Yeah.
is talking.
I know. I said we need to. We don't have any of the naysayers. So I'm gonna try and push that though. All right. So our next question, I think, is gonna try to do that. Okay. So chess is often heralded as like the token essential, like, mascot of strategy. Whenever you see a strategy game reflected somewhere, what's the icon? It's always going to be like a pawn and a knight or something like that. Obviously that means something, to strategy. So my question to you all is chess the perfect strategy game? Or does the absence of randomness and limited uncertainty limit the potential of what strategy games can offer? All right. Well, again, we'll start with Eliza here to keep the cycle rolling.
Well, it is a known fact that the chess has been proven in game theory to be an always winnable by the white, the starting player. If both players would play to their best, to play perfectly. But what I'm going to say is, maybe it's wrong. I think chess, when not played by perfect players, which is an non-existent thing, I think chess has a lot of randomness, because the decisions your opponent makes are unknown to you, and it's not just uncertainty, because it depends on a lot of things. Did they had coffee that day? Are they tired? Are you their sixth or fifth or 10th opponent? Is it a blitz chess session, or you have 10 minutes to take one move? And if you add all those things together, there's no one who could say what the exact decision will be, if they will overlook a step, if they will fall into your trap, or you will fall into their trap. It all comes down to this quantum jumble of decisions and happenings in real life, and then they will make a move, and that's absolutely random, uh,
Mm.
from your side, because they just move something and you don't know why they moved that piece. Is it a plan? Did they overlook something? Is it a trap? So it's basically like rolling a dice, and you have to adapt to it and decide if you want to fall into that trap, or believe that they genuinely overlooked your move, and now you have an advantage. And I know it's more strategical than this, because there's a lot of books on chess, and there are openings and moves that have names and maneuvers and the Queen's Gambit and all those things. But but I think that ultimately chess is a very good strategy game because it's not a puzzle game. And it's not a puzzle game because your opponent is a human being, and it's not set up with fixed rules. It's not like whatever you move, this piece will move to a2. It's not guaranteed that that piece will move to a2. Maybe in some situations where you have the upper hand, it's the end of the game. But that's what I think. I think it has a lot of randomness in terms of when you inject a real world situation into the game of chess. By game theory, it doesn't have anything related to randomness. By game theory, it's a solved game. It has zero uncertainty. So
I never thought I would hear chess as randomness to it. That was an interesting piece there. But
Yeah.
you know, you're right.
But it makes sense. Like in real life,
see,
there's randomness, right?
Not the game itself, not the game itself, but when two human beings play chess, it does have randomness. I think, and because
much more
its
satisfying
rules
to
are very
play chess
simple.
versus a real person than a computer. I'll say that much. When I play against a computer, it's like I'm just getting slaughtered, and I just feel like I'm never going to have the brain power to think 40 moves ahead. But when I play against my buddy, I can sense when he's hands shaking or he's got that little smirk on his face that he's plotting something, you know. And
well, you should know.
True.
I have that even the most sophisticated chess engines work with heuristic algorithms. So if a chess engine would want to make the perfect move, it would take it 30 years to calculate one move. Chess is that complex. So even the best AIs err on the side of what their algorithms allow them to choose between the most scored, between the moves that have the best score, and eventually they pick one and move that, because it's too complex to be so yeah. But I don't think it's if I don't know the answer to the question if it's the best strategy game ever, but its rules are very simple, it's easy to learn and very difficult to master. So if we go by these rules, then it's pretty close to being one of the perfect strategy games, alongside Go. I should add. So we shouldn't forget Go.
All right, Francois, chess, the perfect strategy game, or does the absence of randomness limit the potential of what strategy games can offer?
I mean, I think that I don't know if they are the perfect games. I don't play chess myself, but for sure the fact that they are so static has a cost in mainly in how people will approach it. And I think what Alisa said about the amount of time it takes to calculate a perfect move. But the fact is that chess, even if there is this uncertainty of your opponent, the rules being so fixed, and the fact that there is nothing that is out of your control or your opponent's control, it is theoretically possible to plan out every move, and that is the optimal strategy. If you want to win at chess, you should plan. You should give yourself maximum chances to win. So you should plan all your moves. And what I found interesting in like as a default of chess is that we had to find meta rules to fix that, to fix this optimal strategy to win of thinking everything and taking ages to take your turn. And that's why today in competitive chess, you have the clocks to quantify and rationalize how much time each player has to think about their move. That's why we have speed chess or blitz that was mentioned already. And I think that, yeah, in like there is a flow in the basic strategy of chess that makes it that taking an hour to for just for one turn is the best thing to do. And there's nothing in the rules that prevents that. So we had to create those additional rules. And one other thing for game developers today and game makers, just for the icon, is just because it's the most famous strategy game. I think there's just too much momentum now. You can dethrone chess. It's too late. But one other thing to consider is that having this very static game also has the other side effect that your community as a whole, basically the meta of your game, is always going to be more precise. Like we mentioned with the openers, people are always going to face the same situations, recognize patterns, start to plan for counter strategies and refine the existing strategies. And so it leads to chess in their current state today, meaning that if you want to be competitive, you have to learn and memorize hundreds of openers to just like be accepted in some level of play. And I think that in today's market of games where uh, platforms, free-to-play games, everyone is trying to fight for players' time and attention and people's time and attention. Having this kind of prerequisites to play your game in competitive way can be hurtful for your game. So I would say that that's like one bad side of chess today.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be my take on chess not being the perfect game exactly, but still a
Excellent.
very good game and a very pure and simple game.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Leo, chess, the perfect strategy game, or is there room for opportunity?
No, it's not perfect.
Not perfect. Okay.
Yeah, not perfect because at least in my opinion, I think that it's kind of hard to say there is a perfect strategy game, and it's not just because of the game itself. It's basically because of the players. Each player will think that a different game is perfect for them. So I know that if we go to a like conceptual level, we can talk about it, but I usually try to think about how the players would feel, and I think chess has this problem of being, like I said, too static, right? So I think that that's why it's popular, but there's a lot of people that won't play it basically because I think I don't want to say boring, but it's kind of boring for a lot of people, you know. And like strategy games that we do these days, we try not to be boring, basically. And the randomness adds, in the end, it removes the boring part of the game. And I think that in the end, it's all about having fun. So of course, there are people that will have fun with chess. That's the thing that a lot of people have fun with chess, and for them, maybe it's perfect. But I think there's a lot of other people that will prefer a game that has a lot of randomness, where there's a lot of like tactical decision. And for me, it's like that. Depends on the person, you know. Depends on the player. Like, uh, there might be a player who plays like Slay the Spire and say, okay, this is the perfect game for me. And there's another player who'd say that there's perfect strategy game for me. And then the other player that plays chess and says that the perfect strategy game for me. So basically, the conclusion is depends. But
Mhm.
in my opinion, it's no game is perfect. No strategy game is perfect, and because of all of that I said, basically.
I'm going to sum this up again just to kind of give the audience a recap of what we just heard here. So, first from Eliza, that chess actually has randomness as an input of the human beings that are participating and playing it. From Francois, accessibility is a key part that limits chess's potential as a platform for future gamers looking to get into it because of the sheer amount of rules and openings and study that's necessary to become a competitive player. And then from Leo that without random elements, it can lack a certain degree of excitement and engagement that players in the modern age are looking for. So I find all that very fascinating. I'm just going to say that chess, I agree. I don't think it's the perfect game, that there is potential to expand beyond it. But I will say that chess is the game that made me fall in love with strategy games. So it's definitely something, if you haven't played before, you should at least try it. And particularly with playing with another person, it's good. So thank you for that conversation.
You have Fisher chess was invented to prevent this kind of opening learning. It's just not that popular, but it's a thing, another thing that people actually created just to make chess more interesting and more on the fly than traditional chess.
Yeah. All right. I actually have a follow-up question to that too. Just to kind of play devil's advocate again, since we're all clearly very much in favor of randomness, I would say. So one of the arguments that's often used against randomness in strategy games specifically is that by having a random event, you are potentially, hurting the learning curve of what is meant to teach a player about their essential, I guess, skill in the game. I'll say it this way. Let's say you make a move in chess, and rather than having it capture the piece, you were to use a random event, like let's say the rifle didn't fire. So I go to capture a piece with my pawn. In chess, it would be a certainty that I will capture every time. But let's say we injected a random event and said we're going to roll a dice to see if that pawn stumbles on a rock and falls over, right? So now the argument is, if you now lose the game, do you attribute that to making a bad move? And does that feedback that you received teach you that even though your move may have been good, that you shouldn't have done that? That the randomness now has essentially diminished your ability to learn from the game's outcomes. And let's go in reverse order this time. So we'll start with Leo on that one.
Okay. So I think it depends if you tell the player that there's a chance of using this specific example that you did. Like it depends if you tell the player that there's a chance of that happening. Like if you say to player that there's I don't know 50% chance of doing of not it being a failure, I think the player will be like he can take a decision. Even though it's random, can take a decision. I think chess is not the best example for like adding output randomness, because it was not designed to use it basically. So because in the end, if you design the game thinking of the output randomness, for me at least, to be a good design, you should have give tools to the player to fix that problem. So like when it failed, at least the player will have something to deal with it. It's not like, okay, it failed and now you lost your entire run or your entire game. So like if you have a decision, well, I don't know, 50% of chance that says that, and you know that if you fail, you lose the game. Probably it's better not to do it. You know what I mean? So, but if you know that there's something that will mitigate that problem, like, okay, I have a backup plan for that. And okay, so you create two scenarios in your mind, basically. One is the success one, and the other one's the failure one. If the game has those tools, you can plan for both, basically. So I think that's the thing that I think that's important for output randomness. It's just that you have to give players tools. Of course, I think there's some times that like crazy output randomness would work too, but most of the time it's better to give something to the player to like, okay, I'll do something with that. So just a quick example that we have in Australia is like we wanted to the game, like it's a dice game, and we wanted the game to have the misses of dice, like when you miss, it would be should be useful. So like if you miss, you can use it for something, basically. So when the player misses a dice roll, he has like skills to use it. You know, it's not like just I wasted my roll or something. So I think that's one thing that we try to do to mitigate that feeling of um, to give tools to player to react to output randomness, basically.
Yeah, I like that. Like the risk, essentially, in order to make the situation something that the player can actively make meaningful decisions on, they have to have a pre-understanding of the risk involved. So you can't just take and say, "Oh, you're going to attack this guy," and you have no idea what the odds are. Like knowing the odds of success is a fundamental piece of factoring decision. And the second part of your argument is that you need to have some kind of a way to influence those odds. Like maybe it's preparation. If it was weapons or if it was dice, you have some kind of way to um, prepare for a situation and increase your odds.
Yeah.
All right,
Basically.
let's hear from Francois.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, I'm agreeing with you about randomness. I think it can really be, it can slow down the process of learning the correct strategies. Hopefully, depend on the game, and I'm not gonna expand too much on the specific example here, but you have ways to control randomness, and specifically for first game, first few hours of game, maybe you can have some weighted dice in favor of the player so they don't feel punished and just leave your game before getting into the nitty-gritty stuff, basically. But I think that's just like learning that if you flip a coin enough time, you'll realize that it's a 50-50% chance. It takes the same kind of letting the big numbers talk when you want to learn strategy and effective strategy in a game with a lot of randomness. So you can't really have instant deductions and instant lessons. You have to see enough uh, games and enough situations to start understand like this is worth it. This is on average not worth it. And so I think yeah, it's taking longer. I think it's more rewarding because like we mentioned already, it's you have more dynamic things and more uncertainty and more thrill by just risking everything to gain a lot. This kind of moments that you can have. But for sure, it's going to make make drawing any lesson from your game. It's going to require players to play enough time to see all the possible outcomes, see the different scenarios in which it's worth it, it isn't. Um, so yeah, you have to
Uh,
playing around, and uh, especially I think one important and core element is that I think it was mentioned already, but like your randomness shouldn't decide the outcome of the game. So you should have enough random so that you can overall, in average, if you are making the good decision, you are going to win. And it's not just a coin flip that is going to decide who's going to win, or bad luck on your spawn point makes it that your game is not winnable at all.
I like that word "thrill" that you used. That was good. For some reason, it got me to the idea of this the roulette table. You know, we're gonna 50-50 bet on black or red, right? And it's
Yeah.
that's thrill. Like you've got to the summit of this point, you've prepared all your troops, and now it's down to this dice roll. But I am curious, right? So we've done all we can to prepare, and you've also said that ideally, in an ideal strategy game, that the player, having made all the right decisions, should win. So I'm going to ask Eliza now. Let's say you've done all that preparation. You've equipped all the right gear. You've done all the right choices. You've recruited all the right team members, right? Now you're going up against the final enemy, and it comes down to that one sniper shot and it's a 50-50 chance and the player misses the shot, is that a detriment to the strategy of what the player has spent their whole time building for? Or is that just a, you know, I don't know, I'm gonna let you take that. What is that? Is that good for game? Is that bad for game? Is that, take it away.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly think that is bad for game design in general. If after all things executed and planned correctly, uh, victory or defeat hangs on one roll of a virtual dice, basically. And I agree with both Leo and Francois, and I think that the key is the skill. So to measure the skill of a player in a game which encompasses randomness is their ability to mitigate that randomness. So the players evolve by learning how to mitigate randomness to a level which makes every of their action planable. There can be some unforeseen accidents, like one of your units die, or that alien is harder to kill than you anticipated. But overall, if you learned the dynamics of the game, you learned by statistics and by trial and error what is good and what is bad, and you are given the tools, as Leo said, to make something out of even a bad event, uh, then you should be able to win. And randomness shouldn't be just there for the sake of randomness. Haha, it's a bad roll, you died. That's not good. And that's why in our game you have a lot of action points. All of your units have a lot of action points. It's just an example, because every single unit, if you choose so, can attack 5 or even 6 times in a turn, or they can retreat further back, or they can build a barricade, or they can heal the other and then still have action points to attack or retreat. And this helps mitigate situations where the roll is bad and you just miss, or you miss twice or miss 3 times even in a row. It can happen. It's random after all, but you have the tools to retreat from a situation like that with your experience. If you are playing the game for a longer time, you know what to do in these kind of situations, and you can carve out a victory even of bad situations. I think it's very important.
Yeah.
And
Mitigation seems to be
one
a
last word
key. Oh, go
about
for it. Go for it.
and input, and it's true, and it's also true about input randomness. So we the designers must put a limit onto input randomness to ensure that every map or every mission or every situation is basically playable within the constraints of the rule sets, and there are no outlying map configurations which is like you are dead. That's not true.
You are dead.
Yeah, I said earlier that is the safer route, but yes, it could be it had to be used with caution too. True.
Yeah, I like this. This is good. So mitigation is definitely I'm glad you brought that up too. That's an essential part of it. But we are getting a little bit on the devil's advocate here, which is making it a little more exciting. In that that there seems to be a somewhat of a paradox here, actually, from what I've heard and everyone's saying, which is that um, excitement and thrill involves risk, but you can't have risk unless you have a chance of failure, and the chance of failure has to be real. So there has to be situations which, like I described, can certainly be a place where, like I said, let's say you had all your troops lined up, you made all the right choices, and let's just say, for sake of argument, in your own game, Eliza, that you've whiffed every roll. You lined everything up perfectly. You came prepared to battle. You go to take on the enemy, and it just like whiff, 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 and it's probably like a 0.9999 zero chance of it happening, but it
Yeah.
happens. And in order for that thrill of a success to be real, there has to be that real chance of failure. So yeah, it sounds like maybe
Yeah,
I'll let you continue a little bit more.
yeah, there's a meta to the game design also, which accounts for these kind of very unfortunate events. So it's very hard to balance. But even if all your attacks miss and you didn't do anything else, your units are just standing there and the turn, the aliens shouldn't be able to wipe you out in a single turn.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Uh,
like that too. That's a good
uh,
design rule. Not being eliminated in a single turn is good. Okay, so we have
I
some
mean,
protection measures
if
in general speaking here.
no protection measures, because then you take away the risk, as you said.
Ah,
So
see, that's what, okay.
technically it can still happen. Technically it can still happen, but only in situations where the risk is extremely high from the beginning. So if you got yourself in a situation where the risk is really high and you botch your dice rolls, then it's basically on you, because you should move with your units a little bit more carefully and don't plan on uncertain events to be all successful.
I'm sensing an
Yeah.
out for you here.
That,
Yeah,
that, that that's that's
the
why
out
that's why
is
Marines.
yeah. The out
Yeah,
is
so
as
that's
long
why
as you have enough
sorry.
things, enough decisions, or enough preparedness where at least one thing can be blamed on the player's actions, right? Like, oh, I didn't take the correct sniper rifle, or I forgot to bring the healer with me, or I forgot, as long as there's at least one thing that could have changed it other than the bad roll that you received, which you could certainly blame as well, then maybe we're
Yeah,
in the safe zone.
yeah, and I like hardcore mode in or Iron Man mode in these kind of games, but let's be realistic. You can always reload the game if you want, if
Yeah,
you're not
sure.
playing, and I think that's when being a little bit quote unquote a puzzle game can also give a good experience, because when you fail the mission on the last turn and you can reload the first turn of that very mission and you do some things differently and now you win, that's a good feeling. And you learn
Mm.
by changing your tactics, and you learn how to do it next time even without reloading in a new uncertain situation.
True. Into the Breach has this cool feature, a really well designed feature where you can go back an entire battle. I think it's once per run. It's been a while that I played, but I think it's once per run, and it's a cool feature.
I think it was added later in the after the release. I think it was
Cool.
always you could undo a turn, but not a full battle. And I think for a game such a strategy as Into the Breach, it's cool that you have this little
Yeah.
forgiving mechanic, I would say,
Yeah.
to make a
Yes.
big
True.
mistake.
True.
Yeah,
And what
mitigation definitely
I'm
seems key to the helping with the impact of randomness for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, and what I wanted to mention is that uh, you talked about like having some thrill, and if you don't have any risk, you don't have any thrill. And I think this is really, I mean, as long as you have some thrill but there is enough little random elements, then your game can be balanced eventually over the course of a game, of a whole game session or whole uh, yeah, game. We have the same name for both. But an important thing is that uh, losing something on a dice roll is bad. At the same time, uh, being very lucky on a roll and landing like a 6 or a double 6, so you re-roll the dice and you just have a lot of damage. This can also be bad if you are in a multiplayer environment, because
Yeah.
you gaining a lot also mean your opponent losing a lot. Whereas on single player, most of the time it's okay if you just two-shot a boss because you got super lucky with your criticals. Nothing is going to complain about it, but in a multiplayer environment where everyone's supposed to have the same amount of chance, you have to remember that every time you win, someone is losing something. So
Yeah.
double importance.
Very
True.
true. Yeah, if it comes down to something where there is a lot of stake and time investment, I think that helps, exacerbate the impact of what randomness can be. Like let's imagine you played a game, whatever game. Let's say it was chess, for example, and instead that one random roll, like we said, being talked about on like a do I capture your pawn, flip a coin, right? What if it was you get down, you played 30 moves in, and now it says, all right, forget everything you just did. We're going to roll a dice, and whoever gets the high roll is going to win.
Yeah.
That would be a pretty bad example of randomness, because it would just sort of throw away and make meaningless everything you had built up to it. But if there had been... Yeah.
I think what Aliza meant before is that if at some point your game is about just one random dice throw, but you knew it could come down to this, then if you had options to plan ahead and make sure that you don't only rely on the dice roll, then it's okay.
Yeah.
It's just that you played bad and you ended up in a situation where it's a coin flip. Next time you play better, you invest less money, keep your units safe, etc., and you manage to secure the win.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think we need to make sure that the player will feel like that, right? Because I know it's obvious, but sometimes like we design thinking that the player will feel it, and then the player plays it, and he just blames the game. So if he's blaming the game, probably because of course, there's some people just will blame the game, but if a lot of players are doing that, probably it's because even though it was his fault, right? We didn't show him that it was his fault.
Okay.
So it's important that he knows that it was his fault. So I think it's important.
Yeah, agree.
Indeed. So we've heard at least one definitive thing we heard so far for the favor of randomness is that it can add an element of excitement. So in the contrast, we've been kind of talking negatively, like if a player loses because of this, bad roll, it's not very good. But when you are in a situation where it's sort of like, I made a lot of mistakes. I know I made a lot of mistakes. My troops are surrounded. I'm about to die. It doesn't feel good to lose, but it sure as heck feels good to throw that Hail Mary and I got a 20 against all odds and I've now won. Oh, that's incredible. Everyone loves that feeling, right? So
yeah.
My next question is then, what is the potential for random events to create solid experiences in strategy and management games? And this time, let's start with Francois.
So I'm just wondering what we talk about when we say random events.
Sure.
But for the way I understand the question, at least, I think we already kind of talk about the topic.
Let's say output randomness, because when I say event, it's going to be something that's happening within the game. So we'll make it more specific.
Yeah. I think it's a flavor, just like you have serious and cartoony shows. You can have very static and very skilled games in which you just match two brains against each other, and the point of that is just to master a strategy, and people are going to love that. I mean, chess is already, we talked about it, and it's played a lot still, so there's definitely an audience for that. But I think that adding this kind of randomness and some mainly unpredictability, not really randomness, but unpredictability. Sometimes it's fixed when you start the game, you already know, and you just have inputs. Sometimes you have output randomness. All of that can lead to different kind of strategy, like not the same what we see with StarCraft or Age of Empire, where you have a lot of build orders you need to go online and find, because same thing with openers in chess, you're gonna get destroyed if you go just trying to find out things as the game goes. And so having these kind of dynamic parameters create this, I would say, the optimal strategy shifts to planning for a lot of things and then being able to know when to give up, like really adapt to the strategy by like catching and throwing a large net and knowing when to just bring it all back to one strategy and go for the win. Same thing you have in deck builders, where you alternate between engine building and starting to rack up point or power. You have this kind of same thing Acropolis is a board game I've been playing lately. It came out this year and is a really good example of that, where you do tile placement, but you can cover up some tiles, and really this strategy of going wild on the start, but then depending on who's doing what tiles you can buy and the current situation, then at some point you know that, okay, my best shot right now is to commit on that and basically hope for the best, but I know that I will be ready to sacrifice some other things that I've already planned just because um, it is the best thing to do. And on the other end, being too multifaceted and trying to invest a bit everywhere is not going to lead you anywhere. So yeah, I think this is kind of new flavor of more adaptive strategy than just plain static strategy.
Yeah, I really like, again, that you brought up the accessibility point, comparing the opening moves of chess with the build orders of an RTS is a great example that makes it very hard. I think one of the reasons that RTSs have been struggling to gain the same momentum they once had, because with so many games now fighting for attention, you've got to be really creative as a designer to grab people right away and make those the value of the game and what it's offering in terms of experience immediately noticeable. Another piece that you said that I thought I wanted to just highlight some more that was very interesting was about, I guess, the cognitive overload factor, or the analysis paralysis. When you have too many pieces that you have to juggle, right? Certainly it's going to be something that requires more skill. So those that are more hardcore, attuned to like having to know the knowledge of all the openers, and essentially it's a battle of knowledge more so than a battle of, I guess what to say, like intuition or wits, right? When you've got something that can be played with some random events involved, you can present a situation where there are, limitations and randomness, but you invite the player to sort of creatively solve within that space, and know that despite the fact that randomness is going to have a play in that, you can have a rewarding and exciting outcome as a result of seeing sort of the pattern of how these things could play out. I find that very interesting. Yeah. That's actually, and personally speaking too, one of the goals that I had with Abalon, also formerly Summoner's Fate. I should mention why this big poster's behind me. We changed the title of the game.
Okay.
Yeah. Everyone's like, what? Who changes the name of their game so late? Yeah. No, but that was one of the goals we had. We're a very tactics heavy game, lots of decision making. There's also cards. So you had this design problem of, people that play card games want to have a lot of cards, because the more choices you have, the more freedom and flexibility you have. But then you've also got units on the board, right? So then you've got action points you've got to assign between the characters. And so having too many of those choices creates a situation where you just don't know what to do because you're hesitant. You want to play well or perfectly, but you don't want to take a chance at anything. So one way to mitigate that is limit the choices, right? We have a smaller hand size because you've got characters on board. So, and then you limit the actions. Instead of having move, attack, move, or whatever, you've got just one gesture to control that. And it helps keep the flow of it better, and also allows more opportunities for what I would just call like learn by playing, like just trying things and seeing how the things react. What does the AI do in response to a certain tactic? And that can help create a sense of excitement, and in a way where the randomness or the uncertainty of what the outcome is actually going to be can actually encourage the learning, in contrast to what I said earlier about, a negative random outcome hurting learning, when you can leverage uncertainty to help foster kind of creative play, just exploration. Like, let's see what happens when this happens. And then as long as you've got systems in place, like Leo was saying, like an undo, for example, that's a very essential mechanic, I think. Undo, and you can try something different. So that way, even if it doesn't play out in the way you expect, you can try alternatives in that regard. So yeah, let's hear from Leo next. Again, we're just talking about, to refresh the question, the potential for what, and we're going to specify output randomness. So these are events of randomness that happened within the game, like a dice roll or something to that nature, like a statistic that controls whether a unit hits or not. What's the potential for these to create solid experiences within a strategy game? And you develop a game that specifically has dice rolls. So how do those dice rolls help enhance that experience?
Yeah, the thing is that our game is a dice placement game, so it's kind of like a mix of output randomness with input randomness, right? So it's kind of like, okay, there's sometimes where we re-roll something, a die that we have that like re-roll mechanic on the game, and then the outcome won't be good or no, but at the same time you will be able to use it somewhere. So what I mean is, even though we have those dice, the output randomness is kind of controlled at the moment. But it's funny, there's a character in the game that is okay. This one, when I was designing it, I went full crazy on randomness, and I don't know. Maybe one day we can talk about her specific, but because I love her, and because she's all about randomness. Like she has a lot of things about percentage, and so it was. I say it was crazy because it was a design of a game of dice game that already has a lot of randomness, and I added a lot of more randomness on top of it, and it was at least on my opinion, I think it's fun. That's what it matters in the end. But like she has ability, for instance, that she hits a random target 6 times, for instance.
Okay.
But in our game, there's purify and corrupt. There's two type of damages. It's not like just damage. So purify will damage the enemy, but will heal the player. And corrupt is the opposite. It heals the enemy and damages the player. So with this ability, you don't know where it will hit 6 times, and so it could heal you or could damage the enemy. And this is just output randomness, but you can think about like, when I will use this. Like, okay, I will wait until I'm lower health to use this, because it will have an increased chance of healing me, because there's a maximum health. If you are on the maximum health, you can't be healed, so it will the healing would be wasted basically. So what I mean by all that is that I think output randomness in the end gives those tactical decisions that, okay, let's see what happens. Let's say that she does that action and it never hits her, so she didn't heal at all, and she planned that she was going to heal her. Okay, now she has to adapt and think another way to heal her. So I try to make an example of Australia because it's the best for me at the moment. It's the best one that I have. So
it's giving you more chances. Yeah, I like that. You by having a character that has so many different possibilities, it's sort of like, kind of going back to also what Francois said about the accessibility and the cognitive overload part. You don't have to have so much concentration over like, this is the way she's being healed. This is the way she could be healed. If it doesn't work out because of a random event, I can adapt and then come back and try another option. And it sort of frees up your mind to then focus on the big picture and less so on the micromanagement of one particular character.
And it's funny that she is one of the easiest character. Like she has some builds that are really complex, but like she's really easy to play. I saw a lot of players that are not so skilled with playing good with her. But she's not one of the first characters because she's too crazy, and I didn't want players to like flee away from her. But I think she's one of the easiest ones, basically because of her randomness, basically.
To sum up your answer here, what's the potential for random events? To get a little crazy. To get a little crazy.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I
to
like
go
that.
wild. I think that's
That's right.
it.
That's
To go
good.
wild.
To get a little crazy. What's wrong? That's a great answer. That's good. All right. Let's move on to Eliza. The potential for random events. How can they create solid experiences in strategy games?
Yeah, I want to focus on where exactly my game uses output randomness and the concept of this mitigation of the randomness and why it's a good experience for the player. So I just thought it through. There are basically only 3 places I use a virtual dice to control the outcome of some event. One is the 2-hit roll, one is the damage roll, and one is the decisions the AI sometimes make, how to move or what to do. So it's not much. The other randomness is the input randomness with the map and all the other things. And see, for the damages, we use a unique system where weapons have a minimum and roll damage, which is added to the minimum damage, and only that part is random. And as different weapons have different minimum damages, you can always choose a weapon that has a better chance to do a fixed amount of minimum damage, and or you can opt for a weapon that sometimes has a chance to deal much more damage. And also your unit skill contributes to the overall randomness of this. So if your units are well trained with that type of weapon, and you select and there's also different ammo types for different weapons. So you said you have 2 damage types, we have 8, but it's not because. So these come from the situation that it's a sci-fi environment. So there's fire and cryo and acid and poison. So, but these all have different mechanics. So you can also decide if you want to use some kind of special ammo to do some special effect, for example, acidic damage to bring down the heavy armor of some alien, which was unpenetrable with your smaller caliber guns. But if you tear down its armor, then your smaller caliber guns will also be able to deal damage to that alien, health damage. So this is one way. We only keep randomness in this case to be a have that little bit of thrill. If it's a good shot, it's a critical shot, or it's a miss. Uh, and regarding the 2-hit chance, there's also usage of cover and usage of light levels on the map. So if you want to be sure, so if you really want to hit something, you should cast multiple headlights on it. You should make the position where you basically flank it, and then you will have more than enough chance to say you will probably not miss. And if you do, you have a second and a third shot in most cases. So this way, I think it really works very good, because the player always feels it's tactics and decisions, not the ultimate roll of the dice, which uh, controls the outcome of a situation. Uh,
So realism
so yeah,
and adaptability are the key values that you're kind of conveying. I'm just trying to summarize and
yeah,
pull the essence of what you're saying, though. But like, yeah, having multiple possible types of ammo, they can all interact in different ways. The ways in which they interact is not necessarily deterministic, because there's lots of things that can go wrong. You said mentioned at least 3 points of decision where rolls could be made. But in doing so, you've got lots of room to play. And so the player has sort of I guess it's kind of playing on the adaptability part. They've got a lot of ways to learn and adapt by combining those in different ways to see which one ultimately produces the most effective results that they're hoping to get.
yeah. And just very very shortly, one of my favorites: if you're standing next to an alien and some of your other units want to kill that alien, there's a chance that the shot will miss and it will hit your other unit. So if you want to
Jeez.
mitigate this, you can, because you can first move
Sorry,
away with
buddy. I
your
was trying to
unit.
hit that
Yeah.
metamorph. I didn't mean to blow your face
Yeah,
off.
but you can mitigate it by moving away a little bit, then firing, and then moving back if necessary, which of course costs some action points, but it's a decision
Yeah.
It costs some time, but it makes the situation safer, or you risk shooting your
Yeah, that's a
buddy in
big
the head.
risk. I don't think anything
Yeah.
in games has ever been more frustrating for players than friendly fire. That's a big risk for sure.
Yeah, but as you said, realism. Because if you think
Yeah.
about a
Oh, for
real
sure.
combat scenario, there's a reason why Marines and other soldiers are trained to fight as they fight.
Yes,
You
absolutely.
don't really make a trick shot above your mate's
No,
shoulder
no.
in a combat situation.
Definitely
And
not.
there's a reason for it. So
We can't all be
well,
John Wick here.
we want to convey that this experience and this aliens vibe, the James Cameron aliens vibe, where if you start shooting with a shotgun in a environment with volatile barrels all around you, they will explode and all of your squad will die. You cannot go guns blazing into a room full of hydrogen on the floor. So it's something you have to. So it's your fault if you die, because you should have it's not random. You should keep attention to your
Yeah.
environment.
For
Yeah.
sure, for sure. All right. Well, we're just
I
about out of
think
time.
that
I have. Oh, sorry.
odd
Go ahead.
management. Sorry, I was just saying that odd management is. I think it's a really cool type of design for output randomness. So,
Oh, yeah.
like you control the odds. You know, okay, I have 50%, but if I do that, it increases to 75%. So, I think it's a really good way to use output randomness.
Definitely. All right, we're just about out of time here. I've got one final question. I think it's a great one to close out on. All right. So, is uncertainty a source of chaos that players will endure as a curse, or something that can be embraced for developing a real adaptive strategy mindset? I think I know where these answers are going to go just based on the conversation. There should be no surprises here, but I just feel like it's a good way to kind of recapture everything we've said so far, sum up our key arguments, and why don't we start with Leo this time, and we'll go backwards order again for the last one. All right, Leo, take it away.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like in summary of all what we said, what I said is it's basically that is not a curse, but it can be. So it should just, I think there's no simple answer for that, and like it's not easy to do that on games like when designing it. I think in the end it's all about play testing, basically, to see if you cross the line of the randomness. And it was too frustrating because at least on Australia, it was what makes the game. I don't know if it's that good, but I think what makes it being in the good state at the moment is because we had a lot of play testers, like playing, and so all the frustrations, all the curse from randomness that were happening, I was able to spot with the playtesting, and I just mitigated and was cutting until a point where it doesn't feel that unfair anymore. So I think in the end, it's all about how the players will react, because even though, of course, this is the base of game design, right? But um, like sometimes we design the randomness in a way that it doesn't work in practice. It feels too much randomness. So I think it's a blessing if you do it right, basically, but it can become a curse. So I think that's it.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Francois, blessing or a
Yeah.
curse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a summary of everything we just said. You're right. I mean, first of all, it really depends on the players you are aiming for. I think there is some players that will always perceive any kind of randomness, good or bad. They will see it as losing control and giving it to luck. So it's not going to work for them, and that's okay. I mean, and the other end of the spectrum, there's the party games, the Mario Karts, these game that embrace randomness fully and not even care that much who's the best at the game, just have a good time. We didn't talk that much about it because we're talking about strategy games, but strategy tend to be on the more skill side than party side. And I think that what I take from the last couple of answers for the last question is that I think good randomness is a randomness around which you can play. Like Leo mentioned, the idea of even a missile that's launched like 20 projectile that has a chance to heal, burn, whatever. If you have a situation in which you go like, this is better to use now than in 3 turn, then it's interesting. You are making strategic decision. It's just you're working with the fuzzy values and expected results rather than exact things that you know and control. So I think that a lot of people today embrace randomness, and I mean you see that with all the board games that were successful that include at least a card draw or a dice of a roll, the roguelike deck builder genre, all of that being like very popular right now. So I think there's really yeah, it can be a curse like Leo mentioned. It's obviously if you give it too much place, and playtest is really useful too, because as designers we often we have the spreadsheets with the percentage and the chances of each things happening, but that's not gonna give us a very good idea of how it's gonna feel and how each of those probabilities can pile up into like one just perfect storm of bad rolls. So I think that's, just as we mentioned earlier, having a lot of people that can, you as a designer, give you just the ability to observe this rule, this big number rule happen, and see like, okay, why is this character that on the spreadsheet is balanced, but in the actuality uh, is having like 25% win rate down compared to all of the others? Like, this is the kind of thing you can't, as a designer, plan ahead, and needs to be find out by playtests. But yeah, hopefully a blessing, and I think it's always going to get better with the years to come.
All right. Blessing or curse?
Definitely a blessing. Uh, chaos is fun if controlled. That's the key I am saying in the past hour, that if the systems let the players mitigate and control to to a good extent the chaos that ensures due to the actions, then it becomes tactical and strategic, how you can approach a situation. And just as a last thing, I want to tell you a little story. We have aliens in the game which explode in a fire explosion when they die, and there are worms that explode in an acidic explosion when they die, and there's also knockback in the game. So one time with the rocket launcher, I launched the rocket. It knocked back a scorpion that died, but 3 meters away it exploded. It pushed the worm that exploded in another position, and that acidic explosion fell onto hydrazine that was lying dormant on the floor, which exploded in a fire explosion, and half the squad was dead in a blink of an eye. From a grenade I shot 10 meters away.
That's
and that's and that's
cascading chaos.
randomness.
That is
It,
yeah, that's good.
yes, but it's fun because it was also I could have also avoided it if I was a little bit more careful with what I fire at and with where I position my units. So I think this is the duality that makes these kind of games fun if they are done well.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to recap that again. So, playtesting is the essential key to mitigating the risk of randomness becoming too far gone. You got to just make sure players, you see how it actually works in the real world. The decisions have to be meaningful. So, if the random decisions don't have any weight, or if they can be influenced by other choices, that can lead to them being perceived as having higher value. And then the last one is just my favorite. does it make it fun? Does it lead to a situation where the player can look at the silliness of what has happened and just can't help but laugh? I mean, your example is just a great example of where something like that without randomness you never experience. And even though it may have led to an unfavorable outcome of half your squad being wiped out, I couldn't imagine a situation where a player looks at that and doesn't just shake their head and go, "Oh, I can't believe that," right? And that's the kind of moment we all want to have, right? Is that moment of just appreciation for how the intricacies of these things play together to deliver an experience that feels unique and rewarding and something that is memorable. Really, is the key thing. That's a story worth telling.
I think that's it. Memorable,
Yeah,
epic
memorable.
moments, basically. True.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a
maybe
pleasure,
also
everyone.
experts.
And I thank you so much for participating in this panel. And to our viewers out there, I hope that you check out the other talks and enjoy the rest of TactiCon. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure there'll be a way to follow up with us directly or ask questions or find out more information. And I'd be happy to share additional resources where you can read and learn more about randomness and uncertainty and how it plays into the design of strategy games. All right. Thank you all.